You claim the first paper calculated the odds of the top 100 speedrunners on recording or stream getting these odds during a streak of 6 streams or less. Having read both the first and second paper, this was not immediately obvious to me. So I spoke to the authors of the first paper, and they claim what you believe they should have done would have been grossly unethical, as it would have biased their results in favor of finding you guilty. I asked them this question: if I sat down myself and attempted to replicate what Dream experienced myself, how many times would I have to attempt it before I could be confident I would experience it? They answered 1 in sextillions, like 12 zeros rather than, sorry, 21 zeros rather than 12 zeros over a trillion. I'm a layman. I've done stats courses, but obviously I lack the ability to assess the best way to ask or calculate the answers to this question. However, you confidently express that they asked the wrong question and should have asked another to be fairer. What is your basis for this assessment, especially given that none of this is explicitly in the report you've commissioned? Because the author does not talk about what questions should be asked, merely goes about answering questions.
So I think there's 2 different questions that should be asked. And this is what, again, I don't think that I expressed this in my video as much because I feel like it was less important to, it may be more important to someone like you or like the average person, but less important to my fans or people that are watching my video, is that I think there's 2 different questions. One is the question you should ask in order to verify the run. And one is the question you should ask in order to brand somebody as a cheater. I think there's 2 different questions. I think one of them is, what are the odds of this happening? What are the odds of this happening to one of the speedrunners that we would see, that we would be able to analyze, that we would analyze their run and then put it on the leaderboard? And obviously that number is insanely high, regardless if it's 1 in a trillion or 1 in 100 trillion or whatever it is. It's insanely low. So that's why I said in my video, I don't think it's unreasonable at all for them to have unverified the run. I said that a day after the stats were published, a day after like a couple days after my stream, when the original stats were published. Like, I don't really care if it's verified. I was debating not even submitting it because I don't really care about 1.16, but I got a really good time, so I was like, I might as well. And I expressed that a day after, like 2 months ago or whatever. And so I guess the 2 questions that I think that should be asked are, what are the odds of this? What are the odds of this happening to somebody, or to anybody, or to multiple people within the Minecraft community that are doing all these piglin trades and all these things? Because then I think it's a more fair assessment to say, hey, this is impossible, versus, which is what I believe that their original presentation was essentially, hey, these odds are so low that this is literally impossible, and you are dumb for believing it if you think that it is possible. Which I think is fair to the assessment of, hey, should we verify this run, but not fair to the assessment of, hey, should we brand Dream as a cheater, say he definitely cheated and that there's no way this is possible. And I think that the author of the report that I published wrote something similar about that, saying that he doesn't believe that that it's completely fair to rule out any possibility.
He says it's not a necessary conclusion that you have to reach based on his findings that you definitely cheated. So you seem to be,
which is kind of what I was saying.
This comes up later, another question, but you seem to be suggesting that it doesn't matter how improbable a run is, you should never conclude a person's a cheater.
Well, no, I think that there's obviously certain things. There's obviously I don't think it's unfair to conclude somebody is a cheater off of a purely probability, especially depending on what it is. But what I do think is that it's definitely something that you should have more confidence in outside of it. More confidence in outside of the statistics. And my only reasoning for that is just that
you are somewhat contradicting your video, because in the video you do actually say that you should never conclude a person cheating just based on improbability.
Well, I think my personal view is that I never would, and that you never should.
Sure. So this is a principle, and you can always go to extremes to judge whether the principle is sound. So imagine I have a person who does a 6-hour run, and every 5 minutes they have a 1 in a million chance of getting a good RNG and saving a certain amount of time. And over the course of the 6 hours, they literally get every single 1 in a million chance, all the way at the end. Their time beats second place that took 10 years to make by 6 hours. And this luck is so improbable that for the rest of time, the entire human race could run and you'd never see it again. It effectively destroys the leaderboards. The luck is so insane. In such a case like that, you can obviously see how you'd be like, yeah, okay, that guy clearly cheated, right?
I definitely agree. And so again, I think that's kind of, I wouldn't say it's nitpicky, but I think it's like, my phrasing is more of like, I don't think that's a.
So if I were to change your phrasing based on what you seem to mean, it's that improbable events do happen. You would much prefer that cases where a person is certain in their conclusions that they have more than simple improbability. Maybe sometimes improbability is all that you have, and you have to make a decision, but you'd rather cases have more than simple improbability, right?
It's like as an example, I think that the probability should be gauged with other stuff. So I think there's something that he mentioned, and I think there's a logical fallacy called the prosecutor's fallacy. And what it means is that somebody generally will equate the odds of something happening with the odds of someone cheated when they're not. They may be comparable, or they may be correlated, but they're not at all similar. It's like, as an example, if, let's say, like Illumina, who's one of the most well-respected, he's speedrun since like 2012, and like he's like by far the most respected and trusted speedrunner in Minecraft. If, let's say, he had odds that were 1 in 10 million, I would be much more inclined to believe him than if some random guy, like you mentioned, got a 6-run streak that no one knows who it is, and got 1 in 10 million.
I understand what you're saying, that external factors should be taken into consideration to whether to believe that something improbable happened based on cheating or simple chance. Because in the paper,
I think that when coming to the leaderboards, it's different. I think there's two different things. Like I said, I think the two different, because like in this case, I think that probability is completely fair to use when accepting a run or not accepting a run, because I think that it makes sense. Like if somebody got 6 out of 6, blaze rods, you go like, oh, that's just ridiculous. Like there's, whatever the explanation is, it doesn't matter. That's impossible. We're not accepting a run. But it's a different probability to the fact of, okay, let's look into every external factor of, did this person cheat? And like they did with, is there glitches? Were they using a mod? Were they accidentally using a mod? Were all these different things that that person could have potentially been doing, and they can look into those things and consider them. So I think that's why even the mods recognize in this case that there's more to it than just looking at the probability. There's a lot of other factors.
In the paper, it gives a hypothetical scenario where for external reasons, let's say we believe because you have good character or you have a history or whatever, that the odds of you cheating is 1 in 100. Even if the odds of your run, therefore, are very unlikely, you need to factor that in. And whatever the calculation was, then the odds of your run being cheated aren't necessarily very high, even if the run is improbable, because the odds of you actually engaging in cheating is low. But I understand what you're saying. That's
and
fair.
Something I will mention that, again, it's kind of like the blaze rod thing that I don't think is it's not important. The reason these are things that I originally that I thought of, but I obviously didn't mention in my video because I feel like they're not that important, is that if you were, and I mentioned this one of the mods before, I considered hiring a behavioral analysis to analyze like my streams, because I believe that the behavior that I exhibited was not at all what someone would do if they believed they had higher drop rates. Like as an example, there was multiple times where I traded with piglins when the run was like completely dead and it didn't matter at all. And then there was one time where I got 5 like pearl trades or 4 pearl trades in the span of like 10 gold when the run was dead. And I like logged out right after that happened. Like I like completely left the world. Like, it didn't affect, like I didn't use that world. I didn't run. It didn't benefit me in any way. And I feel like there's certain things that I did that if someone was looking at it and they were like going, okay, what are the odds that this person like was aware or intentionally modified their drop rates and went, okay, this, their drop rates are high, and then analyze them, they'd probably come to the conclusion, well, it seems very unlikely because they did all these things that they would definitely not do if they had modified, these drop rates.
Sure.
And
the behavior analysis is like sort of be kind of hard, I imagine. Like, have you ever seen the range of emotions or actions that people can express when they lose their loved one? Some people are just stone-faced. Other people are just bawling their eyes out. Like people are very different. I would be actually be very interested to see what any like behavioral psychologist or whoever
it's not necessarily of my like words. It's more about like the things that I did, analyzing the behavior of my Minecraft character, like the actions that I took, like going, okay, so he did this, he went in, he traded with a piglin. It's like, as an example, if I know I have much lower drop rates, I'm probably gonna like collect less gold, as an example, or I'm probably going to leave the world.
And the example you just gave of doing extra trades or whatever that you didn't need to do, like why would you do that if you did cheat? Because then it's just giving more evidence that you cheated. You're showing off more improbable things. That is not discussed anywhere that I'm aware of. And I do agree that would have been something.
I've never mentioned it anywhere but here. I just think it's something that I thought about doing. I didn't have the time to do, but I probably would have done if I had more time to release my video. And maybe if it's necessary in the future, I'll end up doing it or something. But I feel like that's why I think that there's certain things even if it is a 1 in a billion or whatever it is,
external things.
There's outside factors to consider where you should, even if it doesn't change your mind, you should consider them, because I feel like it's just important to coming to a conclusion where you go, okay, well, even if it's 1 in 1 billion odds, then the odds of him cheating might be 1 in a million, or sorry, the odds of him not cheating might be 1 in a million, or might be 1 in 10,000.
The paper says this quite well, and certainly, as the paper says, it can't make those rulings. Only we can. So different people again look at different things, and based on their biases and yada yada. So next question. You've already kind of given justification for why you would make these statements, but I still want to highlight them. You communicate many times in the video in many different ways that you communicate many times the obvious reality that even 1 in a trillion events happen every day. This is, of course, misleading because as long as something is logically possible, given enough instances of an event, it will become certain. You continue repeating this many times, but this doesn't change the likelihood that something will happen to you. Your argument is like saying conspiracies exist, therefore Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton are conspiring to make super intelligent elephants. The existence of unlikely events does not in any way, shape, or form mean an unlikely event actually happened.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it does change our perception of that unlikely event, though. So,
sure,
like,
but
example,
this isn't really an argument. It's more just poisoning the well. Like, sure, guys, regardless of what the stats say, though, just remember you can ignore them because these things happen every day.
Well, I think it's not really an ignore thing. It's that you don't, if somebody was to come to you and say, hey, this person cheated because there's a 1 in 1 million odds, that is an argument. You saying, hey, yeah, you're right, but I'm choosing to believe him because of his character, because of what the things I know about him, the things that I've heard that he said, and therefore I'm just going to assume unlikely things happen every day and he didn't cheat. I think that's the way I was trying to present it was essentially that unlikely things do happen every day. Like, obviously not 1 in, even, I guess even 1 in sextillion events happen every day if you're combining probabilities and doing things like that.
With enough sequences, if you
but you're right. So the odds of it happening to me specifically are extremely low. But I guess from my perspective, like, technically it doesn't matter. Like technically, I understand that it may matter to the speedrun mods when trying to verify a run, but when trying to call somebody a cheater, like not just on verifying a run and getting it off the leaderboards, when like actually going out and calling somebody a cheater, I think it does matter. What is the plausibility this happens at all? Because if the plausibility, if it's plausible for this to happen at all, then there is even if it's a 99.99% chance, there is a chance this person isn't a cheater. And if they aren't a cheater, we're tarnishing their reputation, we're spamming them, we're giving them hate, we're all these things that we wouldn't want to do. Like, I'm sure you would never want to do any of that to an innocent person. And so that's why I think it is not important at all to it's not important at all to whether you verify a run, but I think it is important to put into perspective. Yes, unlikely things happen. Whether or not you think an unlikely thing like this happened to me or happened to someone else is completely up to is completely subjective. It's not a very objective thing. My luck doesn't change because I am who I am.
What weight you're giving to the statistical unlikelihood versus external factors, I agree, is subjective. I agree with that.
Yeah.
So this next part is the problem, or rather the question that I have about the paper in regards to the statistics. So I've only jotted it down here, so I might misread it here. As I'm not a statistician, I cannot rule well on the different stopping criteria used in the different papers. However, the paper states the main challenge is that once a speedrunner gets particularly lucky, they are more likely to choose to stop playing. Dream has expressed that this was his stopping criteria. If the last bar in a sequence is always an ender pearl, because then the speedrunner leaves, then it simply cannot be claimed that all bars are fully independent and identical. But this isn't true. If you get lucky and get an ender pearl, it doesn't mean you won't barter again. You will stop bartering in that run, yes, but you will keep bartering because you will do more runs. You aren't stopping your bartering. You are taking a break from bartering. Depending upon your luck, you will leave sooner and come back. But it seems as though, from my naive reading of this, that this person seems to have placed a stopping rule every single time you received after you received 10 ender pearls. And so while the original authors said, well, they are all independent, of course, because you will always keep bartering until the very last barter you do in your speedrunning career, this person seems to believe that a stopping rule should have been applied effectively after every run, seemingly.
Yeah. So again, I just to preface this, I don't understand everything completely just because of the fact that I'm not an expert. But what I took from it is that is the case. When you're talking about a small-ish sample size and talking about somebody getting lucky, like let's assume that I did get extremely lucky, and not that instead of assuming that I cheated, if you assume that I did get extremely lucky, then essentially what he's saying is that you will look luckier. than what you would look like. Because
only on the last run, because because as he points out, your last one was very lucky because that's when you're likely to stop. So when you're analyzing the 6 streams,
even when they're combined, yeah.
Oh, no, but I'm saying when you're analyzing the 6 streams, they aren't really analyzing you and your career. They're analyzing a hypothetical person who did those 6 streams and their career ended on that last stream. And of course, the ending of your career, and if your goal is to get lucky, you're going to probably end when you're very lucky. So a stopping rule would apply on your last stream. But the rest of your luck is irrelevant. So if in one run you get super goddamn lucky, but then you do another barter, in no way is your next barter influenced by the super luck of your previous run. And that's why they used apparently we used the binomial distribution in the first analysis, because they are actually all independent. But the author argues, no, they're not. That somehow the luck in your previous run influences the barter of your next run, which doesn't seem to be the case.
So I'd love to hear what he has to say about this. I did email him about it. Like I said, I think he's going to respond after the holidays, and then I can publish that somewhere. I'm not sure where. But as far as I understand it, is that you're right. That if you're talking about a billion jillion runs, but what I'm talking about is that if you get lucky, you will look luckier, which I think is what he mentions in the report. Is that because let's say if you have a sample. If you take a sample of 300 and it's when somebody got very lucky in a situation where they're stopping bartering whenever they get lucky and they don't do those other trades. And if you assume that I had the normal rates and say his normal rate was 5%, if I would have done 5 more trades, then we can assume statistically that those trades would have been normal trades. Now, obviously, you can't make that assumption because your hypothesis is that I cheated. But if your hypothesis was that I didn't cheat, you'd make the assumption that all my next trades that I would have done with the remaining gold I had would be at the normal rate.
Sure, but that should only apply to your very last stream. But I'm
pretty sure what he's saying is that if you get particularly lucky in a span of multiple streams, if you get particularly lucky, like which obviously is unlikely to happen, but if you do, you will look luckier over that, even with the combined streams, because of the fact that you got particularly lucky. So instead of being particularly lucky and looking and looking like on average how lucky you are, you'd look even luckier because you got lucky and then you stopped, you got lucky and then you stopped, got lucky and then you stopped, and so you got lucky if you get lucky multiple times in a row, then it matters because you'll look way luckier than you did. And so I can
explain it in a completely different way. If you had gotten unlucky 100 runs in a row, and then on that last run you got super lucky, right? The sequence of barters would stop at the same amount of times as if you got 100 times lucky, and then on your last run you got super lucky, right? As in, so how do you explain this? Your previous
have you
barters.
Ran the simulation that he included in the
I can't. I'm. As in, this is just layman talking about something. I don't.
Okay.
He seems to, because he says here, for example, the barter stopping simulation is not appropriate when bartering continues after successful barters, and it always does. Your bartering always continues after successful barters. It's just they continue in the next run.
He's talking about in a particular run. So like as an example, when he did this, he also only applied this to specific runs. So like what his stopping simulation is, he didn't apply to certain runs. Like the run I mentioned earlier, where I got 5 trades or 4 trades or whatever it was, it wouldn't be applied to that because I got more trades than I needed. So he didn't even that run would be counted as binomial distribution. So he's applying a different stopping criteria to each different run depending on what happens in the runs. Like as an example, if I stop right at a pearl, then it's included with the new stopping distribution. But if I continue trading for whatever reason, or let's say I drop gold and then I come back later and there's pearls and a bunch of other stuff, that doesn't count. So it doesn't count towards it. The only thing is that when I stop directly when I get a pearl on those specific runs, which may have only been, let's just say that it happened on 20 runs or something.
But again, you do never stop. You'd always
you stop in that particular run though.
But that's
you stop collecting data, so it affects the sample size, which is what he's saying. So he's saying essentially that if you get particularly lucky, then the sample is going to be lower. So in this case, like because I was getting lucky in all of these runs, the sample size is much lower. Like as if you compare my other 5 streams, the sample size is much larger because I got unlucky. So the sample size is much larger than
example,
these 6 streams.
If you got unlucky 100 times and got really lucky at the end, your likelihood of stopping piglin bartering is exactly the same as if you got lucky 100 times and then got extremely lucky on the last one.
There's 2 different stopping criteria though. What he's saying is is different in a series of data collection and then the whole data collection. So like there's two different, and he applies both different stopping criteria. So he applies the one where it considers when you stop collecting the whole entire data, because like you said, that actually the last one is almost
that one I
definitely
agree
going
with,
to be
yes.
extremely lucky. And then he applied a secondary one, which is also saying, but also within all of these runs, you will appear more lucky if you get lucky, because then the sample size will be smaller. So if you get lucky 10 times in a sample of 100, then that's because
Why
of the
would
fact
the
you got
sample
lucky,
size
that
be
sample.
smaller?
Because if you got lucky 10 times, the sample will be 100. But let's say you got pearls slower, and so you had to trade more, and you got lucky 8 times. The sample might be 120 with 8. So now all of a sudden it's not proportional. Like you have eight trades now with 120 gold versus 10 trades with 100 gold. So it makes the sample size, it makes it appear luckier than it actually is. And he has like a simulation he ran that shows. And again, it's not that far off of what they used, but it's far enough off that when applied to every run, it makes a big difference overall. So it's a very slight change. Like it doesn't because like you said, overall it doesn't change things that much because you're going to keep bartering no matter what. But if you take a particularly lucky streak of runs because they were lucky, they will look luckier when compared to average data because of the fact that you got more pearl trades quicker. So that's how I interpret it. And I'd love to see what he has to say.
It's an interesting interpretation. But you'd agree that the original paper disagrees that stopping criterion should be applied.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, because they didn't use it. I think if they had agreed, they would have used it. So I think
so ultimately, it's a matter of would a person who knows little about Minecraft, little about speedrunning, be more likely to know when a stopping criterion should be applied? I'm arguing that because the original authors knew more about Minecraft and knew more about speedrunning, they would probably know better when such a
kind of cringe. Probably my cleanest run yet, though. Actually, I don't know.